another 30 seconds to hop onto our call. We've got some special guests with us today. So with that, let me turn it over to you, Jim. Why don't we start?
Thanks, everybody, for joining. I am really pleased to have with me two members of the Lebanese parliament who are leading the sit-in. You will notice that they are in coats and sweaters and were before showing me their mittens and wool hats in case it gets too cold. There's no heat and no electricity there. They have flashlights that they've arranged to be able to see so that we can see them. And also Daisy Jadon, who's the filmmaker who made a remarkable film that I had the honor to be at the premiere and participate with her in a conversation.
And to be
was it last year, Daisy, or 2 years ago?
2 years ago. And yes,
yeah, called Enough. And it's just a remarkable film about corruption in Lebanon. And I'm really sorry, but I have to divert for a moment from the conversation to say that I see Janan Smithers on the screen. And Janan and I worked together in the early 80s when we started Save Lebanon to bring wounded children over. And she was so instrumental in helping make that project work. And I haven't seen Janan in decades. So hi, Janan. Listen, let me just start a little by talking about the background to the piece and why we're having the conversation we're having today. There's no question that that Lebanon is in a disastrous state. I say that with a chuckle, and I don't mean it as a chuckle. It's one of those laughs of desperation. We've said for years now, the Lebanon's on the brink, and I don't even know what that means anymore because it seems like it's gone off the brink. It's in a letter that that Najat and Melhem, who are our guests from the parliament, sent to some world leaders. They lay out the economic criteria, the economic data that is typifying the country today, with people living at an average wage of $10, real income of $10 a day, and poverty level has skyrocketed, hunger. That Lebanon, that brought the world the highest cuisine of the Middle East, and elevated it to the fine art, has the massive hunger and food shortages that it has is shocking and tragic, and unemployment and strain in services. Medical services, education, 300,000 kids not in school. It's shocking. And yet, while Beirut is burning, literally, the government is non-functional, and the parliament meets 11 times. And because of the sectarian divisions that exist and the corruption that is so endemic to the system, they can't get off the dime. And so these two newly elected reformists, Najat Saliba and Melhem Khalaf, have taken the initiative to say, you've got to meet and do the election of the president. Now, I would say, and I don't know if they'll agree with me, that simply getting a new face instead of the old face doesn't solve the problem. The sectarian system is still there, the corruption is still there, but there are things that just can't happen without a president in office, without ministries functioning. Though they be corrupt, they're needed to perform certain services that aren't getting performed right now. And so given that, they've challenged their colleagues to, instead of having a pro forma, we get together, don't vote, or turn in silly pieces of paper with Donald Duck on them or something of that sort, to get together and be serious about moving off the dime and getting this done. And I wanted to just turn it over to them with a couple of questions as I begin. Let me ask you two things, and either one of you or both of you can answer each one. The first is are your colleagues moved by what you're doing? I mean, are you getting, what kind of response are you getting from Parliament? And secondly, where is the where's the Lebanese population? Is there a mobilization in support of you, or is there just a sense of this is going to change, nothing's going to change? Where's public opinion right now as you see it in the country? Could we start with your colleagues in Parliament? Are you having an impact on them? Do you feel that? Maybe you start, Najat.
Thank you, Jim, for this opportunity to actually talk to prestigious and honorable members of your institute. Thank you so much for making the time to listen to us. Yes, we are two MPs who staged a sit-in or a defense for democracy. Where are our colleagues? Our colleagues like it. They come to us and say, we really praise you for what you're doing. We honor what you're doing. But let me also describe how the parliament is constituted of. It's basically divided vertically between two major parties, the left and the right. And very few people stand in the middle and talk to each other. So our sit-in that has been since 30 days now, on Sunday it becomes 30 days, have been instrumental in making a bridge between the different parties. If we take the vertical division, none of the parties will be able to create a majority to elect a president. So there is a great need for these two different parties to talk to each other in order for us to get to a number that get us a president elected. So we have been acting like a catalyst in order for the parties to talk to each other, especially that we really believe in inclusivity. We really believe that this country is for all of us and it cannot be divided and should not be divided. And the division has gotten us nowhere. In the contrary, all divisions have led to what you just described, Jim, more collapse at the level of the economy, education, and health. So
let me just ask you a question, Najat, just quickly a question. You describe it as right and left. I see that used in so many different settings, and I have a sense myself of what right and left means here in America. It has to do with role of governance in the economy and whether or not the right stands for less taxes, less government. What does right left mean to you in Lebanon about that division?
Yeah, I want to apologize for saying this. Right means mostly Christian and independent people calling for the sovereignty of the country. Left means Hezbollah and other allies who really have a radical opinion about how to run the country. So, and it's mostly from another religion. I don't like to talk about religion. I'm a person who believes highly in the in the country itself. I mean, I think religion should not matter, but unfortunately, there are a lot of parties in Lebanon who strive by feeding into the religion divide. I leave it to Milham to continue from this on, and we will tackle the second question.
Yeah. Milham, tell me about your sense of where the public is on this. Are they supportive, and have there been demonstrations in support?
Good evening, everybody. Thank you for this opportunity. First of all, I have to be sorry about my English. My English is not weak, and I'm not fluent to speak in English, but I will make an effort just to express myself to make it understood. Look, the question is, where is the population? I think the population is suffering, and actually we cannot ask about demonstration. We cannot push them to go to the street. I think this time, the first time we have somebody who represent our population inside the parliament. And this is the new approach. We don't have to push our people who are suffering a lot about bread, about medicine, about education, about health, about many, many things. The inflation every day, we have the highest inflation in the world, and nobody is care about this consequences. Of course, you can ask about the population, but we cannot ask where is the population, because the population is suffer. They cannot be in the street. And if you want to push them more, I think they have the priority is how to live and to be in their dignity and the dignity of each member of their families. I think we cannot ask where is the population. The population is suffering.
If I could add something, Jim, if you allow me, maybe people would find it harsh that we are sitting here in the parliament in the dark and in cold weather. Unfortunately, for the Lebanese public, it's not something unseen. It has become the normal. A lot of people are living with no electricity and in the cold weather because they cannot afford nor fuel, nor any type of heating to warm their homes. That's why our situation or our scene like this does not look so abnormal to the local people.
One observation, and then I want to go to Daisy. The observation is that it is often mistakenly assumed that the more desperate people become, the more inclined they are toward a revolution or toward activism. It actually doesn't work that way. It's when there's a sudden drop or when there are expectations of improvement that get let down, that's when people will rise up. And I think in the case of the Lebanese, the decline has been constant and steady with no sign of change. And so there's more of a despair and, as you said, a struggle just to survive. And that appears to be apathy. It's not. It's just a draining of the sucking of the spirit out of people's lives. Daisy, I have two questions for you. One is, if you would, it's always hard to talk about people when they're right here, Najat and Milhem. But in your understanding, as you observe very closely, obviously, the Lebanese scene, who are they? I don't mean them as individuals, but these reformists that were elected. What does this mean in Lebanese politics? How did it come about? And then secondly, I'd like to, after that, talk to you a bit about the corruption, the problem of corruption that creates the paralysis. First, talk about the reformists that were elected. Who are they? I don't mean as individuals, but as what does it represent in terms of Lebanese politics?
As you know, thank you very much again for allowing me to join this conversation. I feel privileged. You are a hero of mine for many decades, Jim. So again, to be able to sit with you and to talk about this, the most important topic in my life right now and has been for the last 7 years. These people, Najat, Milhem, and the other members who were elected on May 15, 2022, represent a historic moment in Lebanese history. It's the moment that people around the world, Lebanese around the world and across the country, decided enough is enough and voted for someone alternative to the usual suspects. And they truly represent values that in the Western world we're sort of more familiar with voting for. And it's not the norm in Lebanon. And I think this is what gives me great hope and really encouraged me, despite the fact that we would have loved a landslide victory. It wasn't ever possible for a transformative change to happen with one election. But I think particularly these two heroes that are in Parliament, they are a catalyst. They've taken it to another level, what they're doing for Lebanon, for the Lebanese, and for people in the diaspora, to take action that is beyond, what a normal parliamentarian would do, but to accentuate how serious the situation is. And as Melhem said, the suffering of the people. I agree with him. I wanted to, go sit outside Parliament and, help them. But, he's right, and Najat's right. Like, not me, but the people are suffering so badly that it's not necessary. And in our conversations with these two MPs in particular, the responsibility is upon the elected officials, and the elected officials are the parliamentarians, and they should be in Parliament doing what these two are doing and returning to be able to re-engage Parliament and allow, for official functioning of the country again through those mechanisms and institutions. So that to me symbolises what these reformists are. They are the beginnings of change, and it might take one. I really have a lot of hope that the next elections in 2026 could be the transformative elections, but we've got a lot of work to do to get to that stage. But that is my view of, the reformers. And they are, just one thing I want to clarify, they're from every faith. They're, I know Najat was describing left and right in Lebanon as, there's Christians and other groups, and then there's mostly those that, support Hezbollah. But just to be clear, it's not a Christian-Muslim thing at all, because the 13 members that were elected are from every faith, Druze, Shia, Sunni, Maronite, Orthodox, whatever there's so many. And they represent communities of those faiths. So they're just, it's trying to define it as left-right as we know it in the Western political frame. It's not quite, but there's those that, support Hezbollah, and then those that don't support Hezbollah is basically really how I would define it.
Yeah.
And your second question, which I forgot completely now.
Let me ask a different question. Yesterday was here in the West Valentine's Day, but in Lebanon it was Rafiq Hariri Day, and I knew him when he was in office. I knew him before he was in office, and I have a flag in my in my office. It weighs a ton, and it's bronze, and it's got this Lebanese flag with little bronze fringe around it. And it's a funny story, because when I went to see him when he was first prime minister, at the end of the meeting, he said, "Anything I can do for you while you're here?" And being a wise guy, I said, "Yeah, that flag, I want the flag." And so a little while later, a guy shows up at my hotel with, "This is from the prime minister," and he brings me the flag, which was a hell of a thing to try to get it in the States because it was so heavy. But he was a character. He was a larger than life character who people point out his flaws, and there were, of course, but there was also a vision of, I remember seeing him at one point, and he said, "What are people saying?" And I said, they're complaining that you're doing everything in the capital, but you're doing nothing in the north, nothing in the south, nothing in the Bekaa. And he said, "You tell them for me that if the heart stops beating, the body won't live. And so we've got to get the heart beating again." This was very early on when, people who don't remember Lebanon at the end of the Civil War, Beirut at the end of the Civil War, West Beirut was a ghost town. And it's remarkable, the transformation. I said, when he died, I wrote a poem, and it ended with, "He needs no monument, he's got one. It's called Beirut." So I just wanted to acknowledge that. But what troubles me is that he was murdered with so many others, Basil Flahen and others in his cabinet. no accountability. The port explosion, no accountability. The banking system, no accountability. Milham and Najat, what can be done to create accountability? Is there a will among members of the parliament that you know to say, if we don't have an accountability, then we don't have a country. We can't we can't function if there's no account. And I say that as an American, right? George Bush got away with dragging us into a war and that murdered hundreds of thousands and lost American lives. And there are still 20 veterans dying every day from suicide who've gone through the post-traumatic effects of that war. I mean, there has been no accountability here either. I mean, these are devastating issues, but certainly with the massive issues that have unfolded in Lebanon, what do you do with no accountability? And can you create the pressure that says somebody's got to pay for what happened?
I will start, but definitely for the port explosion, I would leave it to Milham to explain or talk about it. But I want to say that for the past 48 years, the warlords who run the country during the war have given themselves impunity and decided to rule the country after the war. And so we've been for 48 years ruled by warlords. And that's why since 48 years until now, we have not had regular or normal country that has accountability or has any transparent process. With the change MPs that are 12 of them this time around, and it is because of the diaspora that we were able to get 12 MPs, because they also tried to bribe and work around the election system in order for them to get the majority. But with the help of the diaspora, we were able to get into the parliament with 12 of us. And this is when for the first time, we are asking them to respect the institutions and to apply the constitution the way it is. And this is why we're staging this sit-in here. So for the first time since 48 years, we are asking them to stop and say, enough is enough. We have to build a country. And we think we need to build a country by starting with the top and enacting the executive body, that is the cabinet, after electing the president, and then have the parliament do its job, which means, coming up with new laws, but also monitoring and evaluating the job of the executive body. So with this in mind, this is why we're fighting. This is why we're saying we want the democracy to be applied. This is why we're saying we need to start by respecting the institutions for which we, for which we belong. So it is extremely important for us to start the change by asking them to comply with the constitution and start assuming their roles and responsibilities.
Look, apparently, Lebanon is a democracy, apparently. And when we talk about democracy, one of the pillar of the democracy is the accountability. But if you think about last 20, 30 years, it's not only we don't have an accountability, but also we don't have the other two pillars, who is the separation between the powers or the rotation between the powers. And the reality, we have a dictature, religious dictature, and this is the reality of Lebanon. And when we talk about dictature, we are talking about out of any law. Nobody respects the law. Why? Because the first règle. The first
Rule.
rule is the consensus. You can make any consensus among the parties, the political parties, and you can make any violation about the constitution. That is the real dictature in our country. Lebanon is not living a democracy. It's just in the appearance, it's a democracy. And what you're saying about the accountability, it's obvious when you talk about impunity. Our, how to say, regular mentality with the traditional political forces, they are not, how to say, care about the law. They are up of the law. They are up of the justice, above the justice, above the law. And this is the mentality during the last 20 or 30 years. For this reason, when you came and you say, please, we want to apply the law, the answer was, it's the first time we have to think about it. And when we entered on the first time in session, in parliamentary session, and we ask about apply the internal reglement, all of these people said, since 92, nobody asked about it.
We do consensus, yeah.
And
We do it by consensus.
this is a real problem in Lebanon. The impunity, non-accountability, and of course, without any rules of democracy. For this reason, the citizen in Lebanon is in a dangerous situation because nobody wants to apply the law. And the only, my alliance is the law.
Jim,
Listen, Daisy, I want to go to you. And
just-
then I want to ask Maya what we've got in the hopper.
I just wanted to add to that and to answer your question, how do we get accountability? It's almost impossible in this term right now because we don't have the numbers in Parliament. I think we have to use the instrument of the election to be able to win seats in Parliament during the next elections for us to really be able to force change. And I think that's where these MPs and those for change stand, into abiding by the Constitution, abiding by the democratic law and the rules. But I think this is a call out and a real reminder to Lebanese in Lebanon and around the world who have the right to vote that 2026, we need to vote. 50% of the population, again, didn't vote. I know it wasn't quite as clear and straightforward in the 2022 elections, but that's what we have to do. The only way that we're going to eliminate this impunity and this system that's been embedded for the last 4 decades is if we slowly vote them out of power. We need to do it the right way. We're not going to stage a coup. We're not going to have external implementation of power by another nation. We want sovereignty. We want to do it ourselves, and they can speak to that. We've got to do it our way. And that means the Lebanese people need to get engaged and get involved and vote the right way next time.
But is it going to last till 2026? I mean, does the country survive till then? Maya, what do we have in the hopper?
We have a lot, and I know we're at time, so if you'll indulge us and stay with us a little bit longer, I want to get at least two questions in. The first is really quite specific for all three of you from Nina. What is the extent of your interaction with the special UN envoy and other UN entities based in Lebanon on your protest movement, and have you sought any support from them, especially as they have regular meetings with the top government officials?
I want to say my experience with the UN, especially that I'm the first woman to face 120 men and ask them to come and do their job. And I was hoping that UN Women and other UN organization would actually give me the support and at least say a statement, make a statement in support of democracy and women standing in this way. And repeat, after I sent them a voice message and a letter, they repeatedly said that they don't want to take a political stand, which is a bit surprising because usually they are in full support of pushing women to go into politics. And then when women are in politics, they say, oh, we don't want to interfere because that means politics. So from this end, I'm a bit surprised by their answer, and probably after they explain it to me in a letter, I will understand their position. But yes, I mean we haven't seen any support from the UN officials in Lebanon, unfortunately.
Thank you for that. I'm going to combine two questions in one. Muriel is specifically first acknowledging with deep gratitude for everything that you are doing, including your resilience and hard work. And as someone who's Lebanese, it's renewed her faith in Lebanon. But specifically, she's asking, what can expats do? We feel useless and powerless, and we'd like to do more to be able to help. And then Kamal is noting, and I think it's sort of in a related way, that why is this not taking hold in Lebanon in particular? Like, why have there not been more mass demonstrations? If you can touch on those two issues as we wrap up.
Let me go to Daisy for that, okay? I think because it's what her film actually was about.
Yeah.
On the mass demonstrations, I repeat what Matt said, and we wanted that initially. We thought that would be the right decision, but as we have stated, the people have been step by step beaten down. They're at the worst point of their existence. They're barely able to feed their families and stay warm and have the courage to wake up every morning, get out of bed and go and do whatever they can. There's no jobs even for them. So I don't know how they're making ends meet. The inflation, the economy is completely in crisis, and the Lebanese lira today reached 77,000 Lebanese lira to $1. A few years ago, it was 1,500 Lebanese lira to $1. So in relation to the mass demonstrations, I really think that the politicians need to deal with this because the people, especially it's winter, it's freezing, there's no energy. So I think that's where we stand on that point. And in relation to what the diaspora, expats, Lebanese should be doing is staying informed. There's quite a few groups that are talking about what's going on. I put out a lot of stuff on my socials and YouTube. I do a lot of interviews with Milham and Najat and others and the people. My reason I've located from Australia to Lebanon is to be able to deliver content to the world, not just to Lebanese, but to the world on what's really going on. But as I said before, the most effective way that expats can be engaged is to speak to their local members of parliament in their own cities and their media organisations and say, hey, why aren't you covering this? Why aren't you covering the story about these two MPs that are standing, trying to defend the institution of democracy in this country? Why isn't anybody hearing about this? And why aren't we putting pressure on members of parliament in our own countries externally, saying, hey, you stand for democracy. You should be siding with these people who are in parliament trying to defend the institution of democracy. I think we as people need to be putting that pressure on our parliamentarians in our local areas. I think that's the most effective way to really draw attention, because there's so much news going on. There's crisis everywhere, the war in Ukraine. But if we as individuals lobby and advocate for what's going on in Lebanon, and particularly this action by Najat and Milham, that will help a great deal.
Listen, Maya, I have an idea, and this is something an executive director never likes to have happen when the president of the group has an idea and announces it then to 100+ people and says, we're going to do it. This conversation has been extraordinary, and I appreciate so much the time that you all gave us. And I appreciate all the comments. I've been reading the chat. I usually don't read the chat, but I just wish we could get into every one of the questions here. And what is needed, as Daisy just said, is information and a conversation, a continuing conversation. So while Coffee and Column on Wednesdays will continue to be my weekly column, and I'm gonna stick with that, I'd like to find another day where we will have a Lebanese conversation, a conversation about Lebanon, to be precise, not a Lebanese, but a conversation about Lebanon, and do it, you know, maybe once a month, maybe every other week, and invite those of you from Parliament, Daisy, to engage and grow the numbers and grow the information and develop some ideas. In the meantime, please write if you have ideas. I'm going to share the chat with our guests. There were a number of questions I wish we could have gotten to, and there were some of you that I wish could have asked your questions directly and maybe made some comments directly. But this is a conversation I think that just can't happen whenever I write an article about it. And no one else is doing this kind of a engaged conversation from people from different continents, even on this call. I saw Rami Khoury was on for a while, had to go. I mean, there's some really good people, and we need to continue it. So that's my intervention, Maya, and we'll come up with a date and let you all know. And we're gonna talk about Lebanon and continue to talk about it and come up with ideas of maybe ways we can do something here in the States to support that sit-in. Hopefully you won't have to be sitting in that much longer, and hopefully it's going to get a little warmer so that you won't be sitting there in your winter coats. But something's got to give here, and I so appreciate your leadership. And Daisy, I so appreciate what you've been doing. And please, we didn't get to show a trailer from the film, but give people the website where it is, because it's a remarkable film, and I was so delighted, as I said, to be a part of it. Daisy, you want to just tell them?
I can tell them, yes, it's if you go to Daisy Gideon on my socials, just the way my name is spelt. The trailer is on all of my platforms, on my YouTube, and so it'll be really easy to find. Just Google trailer enough, Lebanon's Darkest Hour, and it'll pop up on YouTube. It's about 2.5 minutes, and it'll really give you a summary of the film.
Maybe one night we can actually do a viewing of the film
Online
and do it, as many of you as can join us and others to watch. Thank you all so much for being a part of this conversation. And we'll let you know as soon as we come up with a date for a follow-up, and then we'll try to do it regular so that we have this growing conversation about Lebanon. Thank you. And I'm seeing a lot of good idea comments, and I appreciate that. Maya, I have a good idea. See, pretty good. Huh?
You did indeed, and I just want to remind folks that I actually put the J Zogby address email in the chat. It's jzogby@AAI-USA. If there's things you wanted to offer that could also build on this conversation, please send it to those. And thank you again to the MPs and to Daisy for joining us.
Thank you, Jim. Thank
you all. Have a good afternoon. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Next week's column is some positive vibes. Next week you're all gonna get mad at me. Not all of you, but some of you will get mad at me because I've been tweeting about this. I am so offended by Israeli journalists reporting on 3 milk trucks driving into Jenin with undercover heavily armed guys opening fire. Palestinians respond and they're killed, 10 of them, and the Israelis killed 10 terrorists, or it was a ticking bomb. And the only evidence we have that it was a ticking bomb was that they're dead. Meanwhile, Israel's holding 800 Palestinians as administrative detainees, and they have no charges against them, no trial, no nothing other than Israel says it. So accepting their word is something journalists shouldn't do. They should ask questions. When police officers kill an African-American, we ask questions. We don't just accept. We ask questions about it. We don't. And at the same time, I'm offended by Arab media when a 13-year-old kid stabs somebody or gets a gun and shoots people. I read an Arab press article saying a successful operation, or that's not an operation. It's a desperate, crazed kid committing murder and killing some innocent person who just happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. And we just have to start asking tough questions. And if accountability belongs to politicians, it also belongs to journalists and the rest of us, and how we talk about this. So anyway, I wrote a piece about it. I'm going to talk about it next week, and I hope you'll be back and join us for that. And then we will, yes, and Ralph Nader will join us. I saw a comment about that. We're going to have Ralph Nader on. He wants to do it, but it's got to be in the evening. He can't do it at 2 o'clock on Wednesdays or another day. So we will continue this conversation, and thank you all for being here. And I hope to see you next week and in the weeks that follow. Bye.
Thank you, Jim.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you very much.